Discover 6 surprising avocado mistakes seniors must avoid for amazing health transformation. Margaret waved her wooden spoon in the air, feeling a rush of excitement as she scanned her kitchen filled with ripe avocados. The internet raved about their benefits, and she was determined that this green fruit would rescue her from a health scare that had left her shaky and uncertain. She clutched her apron tightly, so ready to transform not only her diet, but also how she lived. Yet, beneath that enthusiasm lurked an unsettling tide of self-doubt. What if she messed up? She could already picture the first avocado overripe, mushy, the result of her eagerness overpowering logic. Just cut it open and see, she muttered under her breath, hoping to quiet her racing mind. The whispers of her friends and family replayed in her ears. Nutrition is paramount at her age. But every online video you watched led to different conclusions, each promising answers that left her feeling more lost. Did she need to avoid the pit? Was oil a delusion? For a woman who had always guided others, she faltered in her confidence, feeling like a lost child in the supermarket. Before she could spiral down that path, she fished an old box from the back of the pantry. Dust danced in sunbeams as the box cracked open, revealing brittle pages of her late husband's family recipes. Part of her trembled at the idea of nostalgia, unsure if she wanted to dig up memories that might choke her. Would these recipes bring back the laughter of their family dinners, or would the weight of it all bury her under grief? Quickly, she forced herself to smile, recalling faces around the table, voices swelling in harmony as they shared hearty meals. She glanced warily at her son, Ben, whose career seemed to dangle precariously between reason and dreams. While she wanted to encourage him, her heart tugged anxiously, questioning if she was helping or enabling his indecision. Could she really bring him clarity through her cooking, or was she merely amplifying the noise in his life? Tension swirled around them like flour in a mixing bowl, saturating the air thickly. Conversations at their table felt uneasy, each simmering with underlying codes of ambition, fear, and unspoken expectations. It was time to figure this out, to face the doubts that pushed forward in their family dynamic, especially now that everyone teetered on the brink of uncertainty. Just when her newfound purpose seemed tangible, Margaret learned about a health fair focusing on senior health and nutrition. Oh no, who was she to share her culinary path among the younger generation? Anxiety flooded her, making her heart race. She'd heard the whispers was her dedication to nutrition, primarily through these superfoods, valid? Or was it merely another fad, a trap waiting to swallow her whole? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The day of the health fair loomed, those worries swelling dangerously in her mind. Who would listen to an elderly woman talking about health in a sea of vibrant, energetic faces? In a world that often overlooked wisdom, had she become a mere whisper amid an overwhelming roar? As she gazed at the mirror, preparing to face the crowd, Margaret felt the weight of years pressing down upon her, memories tinged with laughter, loss, love, but also a fierce determination bubbling to erupt. Would she dissolve under the scrutiny, or step into her own power, leaving behind the insecurities that had plagued her? As she tightened her grip on the podium, the air seemed to thicken, the struggle for acceptance hotter than an oven. The outcome of this moment lay heavily on her soul, a question left nagging as she took a breath, teetering on the brink of something yet undefined. The crowd buzzed with energy as Margaret approached the podium, her palms slick with perspiration. Each face before her was a canvas of youth and confidence, their eyes bright with expectation. What if they saw through her facade, recognizing the cracks in her resolve? Her heart thudded loudly, drowning out the voices of those who believed in her. Somewhere deep down, a voice resonated. She was not just presenting, she was reclaiming her narrative. Drawing a steady breath, she allowed herself to center her thoughts around the avocados. Each creamy slice symbolically bared the vitality she wished to embody. It was a lesson far more profound than simple nutrition, It was about embracing imperfections while reshaping them into something beautiful. I'd like to share with you the transformative power of avocados, she began, her voice wavering slightly at first. But more importantly, it's about how we can embrace our journeys in health and wellness. As she spoke, Margaret consciously focused on the words, feeling them gather momentum. She infused her personal anecdotes with the overarching theme of resilience, painting a picture of loss mingled with triumph. Each story illuminated her struggles and the tentative steps she had taken toward health. The reactions were varied, but she caught more than a few nodding heads, eyes glimmering with understanding. Gradually, the audience drew closer, their rapt attention pulling her into their world. She noticed a young woman in the front row, her posture confident, yet her brow furrowed, clearly grappling with a similar blend of uncertainty and ambition. Perhaps Margaret wasn't just speaking to them. Perhaps she was speaking to herself. And remember, she continued, health isn't one size fits all. It's an evolving journey. The words sat heavily in the air like the avocados resting on her kitchen counter the potential waiting to be unlocked through exploration and experimentation rather than fear. As Margaret wrapped up her presentation, she felt a surge of energy, a flicker of the old spark igniting within her. It occurred to her that sharing her story wasn't merely about guiding others. It was a poignant reflection of her own growth. The weight of her insecurities began to lift, replaced by a budding confidence that she could navigate these uncharted waters. She could light a path through her own struggles for those around her. After the session, several attendees approached her, expressing gratitude for her vulnerability and guidance. Their thoughtful inquiries swirled around her, a beautiful tapestry woven of shared experience. Among them, the young woman from earlier stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. You made me realize I can also reshape my health journey. Thank you for trusting us with your story. Margaret felt something shift within her. Was it possible that her purpose extended beyond just sharing avocado recipes? Perhaps she could support others in their own journeys, becoming a mentor of sorts. As she considered the realization, a vision of workshops filled with laughter, cooking classes, and discussion circles unfurled before her. Still, a familiar twinge of doubt tugged at her. Was she ready to expand this encounter into something concrete? A gut instinct told her the answer lay in the upcoming week. An email she'd known was coming but had avoided reading. A letter from the local community center proposing a nutritional series aimed at seniors. It felt like an invitation and a challenge all at once. As her heart raced at the prospect, Margaret found a steely determination rooted in her core. The time had come to face the question that had so long lingered in the back of her mind. Could she really step into the role of a leader in this unfamiliar territory? With a deep breath, she steeled herself to click open the email, excitement mingling with uncertainty. The moment of truth was near. Would she take that leap into this new chapter, or would she retreat once more into the shadows of doubt? As her finger hovered over the open button, the answer danced just beyond her grasp. The screen flickered to life as Margaret opened the email, the familiar subject line greeting her like an old acquaintance. Her pulse quickened, anticipation and anxiety intertwining like old friends. The proposal felt daunting. Leading a nutritional series for seniors was no small task, especially for someone still shaking off her own insecurities. As she read, her mind swirled with possibilities. 6 lessons distilled into actionable tips could resonate. But who did she think she was to lead this initiative? The implicit responsibility pressed down on her like a weight. They were seeking someone with expertise and confidence. Did she truly possess the ability to guide them when she had only just begun to navigate her own journey? She leaned back in her chair, the fabric beginning to feel constrictive. Her thoughts raced. In that moment, clarity broke through. It was not about being infallible. It was about sharing what she had learned. What if her blend of personal experience and practical knowledge could actually help someone else? Could she transform the very hesitance she felt into a stepping stone for others? Fire ignited within her. A series designed for seniors could provide an avenue for her ambition. She envisioned the bright laughter and bright minds of the elderly, rich with stories and life lessons. They had danced through decades of dietary fads and trends. Could her focus on avocados really resonate with a community so seasoned? The challenge both thrilled and intimidated her. Margaret pushed herself from the desk and walked to the kitchen, her sanctuary. As she stood before the basket of avocados, vibrant green yet varied in ripeness, she felt a growing conviction in her core. Each one represented a lesson in patience and care. They demanded attention, a simple act of nurturing. Just like the seniors she would engage with, they needed the right environment to thrive. Her mind turned back to the young woman from the presentation. Margaret had felt connected to her uncertainty, and suddenly, she envisioned a room filled with older adults, faces lined with stories, expressing their own doubts and fears. Would they voice their concerns as warmly as that young woman had? Could her own experiences be a bridge for them? She felt a ripple of determination pool at her center, a decision rising to the surface like ripe fruit ready for harvest. She could parcel out knowledge while also inviting dialogue. What if, amid lessons on avocados, they also shared their life philosophies, creating an atmosphere of exchange where vulnerability met practical skills? Felt promising. A smile crept onto her face as she imagined forming connections grounded in empathy. Margaret grabbed a notepad and began to outline her thoughts, her hand moving with urgency. She jotted down ideas for simple recipes, discussions about nutrition, and even the science behind avocados that might intrigue them. Yet, as ink flowed onto the page, familiar doubts nudged at her psyche. What if her approach fell flat? What if the seniors were disinterested or disengaged? With every optimism came a wave of anxiety, a shadow trailing her light. Still, deep inside, she realized growth demanded discomfort. There was a profound opportunity waiting just beyond the edges of her doubt. Could she truly create a nurturing space that fostered both learning and connection? As she leaned back, she took a moment to breathe, inhaling the scent of the fresh produce that surrounded her, a reminder of the vibrancy she wished to instill in others. The roadmap of her initiative began on that page, each note representing a step into the unknown. Determined, Margaret prepared to transform this email into a course, a workshop filled with the echoes of stories and laughter. Yet, as she sealed the notepad shut, a question lingered within her, paralyzing yet electrifying. Was she truly prepared to face her own reflections as she probed the depths of others? With her heart racing anew, Margaret realized that clarity and chaos often walked hand in hand in the realm of growth. The real confrontation was not just with her insecurities. It was with the vibrant potential of the stories yet to unfold and the community she sought to embrace. Every moment from here would require authenticity. But could she harness that authenticity while leading others? This was the new challenge she had set for herself, one that hung heavy in the air around her. Would she step onto that stage and take on the role of mentor or shrink back, confined by her own fears? Margaret paced the length of her kitchen, her thoughts racing like leaves caught in a whirlwind. The email lingered at the edge of her mind, a siren call beckoning her to step beyond her own hesitations. Could she really lead an initiative, a consensus not just of information, but one that could breathe life into discussions that mattered? The entire concept pulsated with potential, hinting at a rejuvenation not just for her prospective seniors, but for herself. It felt necessary, yet daunting. She sat at her kitchen table, pen in hand, her brow furrowed in concentration. Suddenly, the abstract threat of failure crystallized into a tangible dread. What if her knowledge wasn't enough? What if they were disengaged or overly critical? Those thoughts slithered into her mind like shadows, unfurling into dark possibilities that threatened to snuff out her newfound exuberance. For a moment, Margaret allowed herself to spiral, teetering on the edge of self-doubt. But the avocados on the counter, the vibrant green skins glistening beneath the overhead light, were a chiding reminder. They didn't yield easily. They demanded attention and care. There would be mistakes in preparation, perhaps an approach both in cooking and leading. Yet, the process, the exploration of taste and texture, resonated profoundly with growth. Each misstep could serve as a lesson, not just for those she would share with, but for her own evolving narrative. She jotted down the basics of her workshop, crafting lessons that not only spoke to nutritional wisdom, but also embraced the lived experiences of her participants. Would they be interested in the ripeness of avocados as a metaphor for preparedness, for readiness to engage? A smile ignited in her as she envisioned physically demonstrating the importance of handling avocados with care, bridging the gap between theory and embodiment. But a new layer of complexity surfaced. She envisioned herself in front of the group, warm gestures, inviting smiles, and a room charged with curiosity. What if, among the discussions about nutrition, their own experiences spilled out narratives of triumphs and regrets? This was a delicate balance she had never had to master before. She was stepping into an uncharted territory, not just to teach, but to learn from those who had lived lives riddled with stories of resilience and struggle. The depth of connection she sought wouldn't come solely from her expertise, but from the authenticity she instilled within the space. Could she allow her vulnerabilities to surface while encouraging theirs to blossom? Her resolve solidified as she prepared to draft an outline, embracing the combinations of strategies and collaboration. This was more than a workshop. It was a potential community formed through shared meals and exchanged wisdom. Yet, as she dove deeper into her planning, there remained a thread of uncertainty that wove through her thoughts. The self-discovery of the mentor role. Would stepping into this position truly change her life? Confronting her insecurities loomed like an immovable mountain. The moment of truth was not just in the class she would lead, but in her acceptance of her own journey, a necessary confrontation with who she was versus who she hoped to become. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the kitchen in warm golden hues, Margaret gathered her notes and resolved to start including elements of storytelling. She imagined a prelude to each lesson, where seniors could introduce themselves and share their perceptions of health, food, and all the moments that brought them to this point in time. Today, her fears were palpable, alive and swaying like the shadows of the avocados. But what lay ahead felt equally thrilling. Her humor mingled with their wisdom could foster an engaging exchange. Perhaps this was the key to unlocking not only their transformation, but her own. With a deep breath, Margaret sensed a shift within her. She was not simply dictating information. She was proposing a journey, a mutual navigation of uncertainties and flavors. Could she orchestrate this balance without losing her footing? This thought settled on her chest, thrilling yet daunting. Tomorrow would bring its own set of revelations, its own fears to confront. Would she be ready to listen and learn from those whose lives were carved by time and experience? The floor was set for encounters that promised to unravel not merely hidden avocados, but the very layers of her authenticity. Margaret woke the next morning to the soft rays of sunlight filtering through her kitchen window, illuminating the scattered notes and sketches that spoke of her aspirations. She reveled in the quietude of the early hour, a tranquility that reinforced her determination to confront the day ahead. Yet, nestled within the pleasant atmosphere was a simmering tension and awareness that she was on the brink of something transformative, both for herself and those she was destined to meet. The weight of her responsibilities settled on her shoulders. As she worked to finalize her workshop outline, she envisioned each segment pulling forth the complexities of nutrition intertwined with holistic stories. Food as sustenance, yes, but also as a means of connection. Each lesson had to resonate, compelling her participants to engage not only intellectually but emotionally. She felt a thrilling notion blossom in her mind. What if she created an environment where vulnerability was welcomed like an old friend? Yet, shadows of doubt crept in, nipping at her enthusiasm. Would they find her methods disruptive? What if her light-hearted attempts at humor fell flat? The very essence of her workshop depended upon fostering a space that encouraged sharing and authenticity. But would she be able to facilitate that effectively? At the thought of facing a group, her stomach fluttered erratically. Embracing her authentic self meant exposing her inner uncertainties, and the prospect felt daunting. She moved around the kitchen, restarting her coffee as if the ritual could ward off her dilemmas. The aroma wafted through the room, merging with the anxiety that clung to her. Could she really provoke honest dialogue among her seniors? After several sips, a single idea struck her. Rather than empty statistics and prescribed guidelines, what if she led with questions? What if she crafted opening dialogues that sparked conversations engagement, not built on obligation, but curiosity? She could structure her lesson around the unguarded discussions of food past and its meanings, weaving them into contemporary practices that addressed their health concerns. In the flurry of excitement, she found a pencil and began rewriting her workshop agenda. Each point became a question, a conversation starter. How did your relationship with food evolve over the years? And what memories do certain meals evoke? Began to fill the page. She allowed her mind to wander, imagining the elderly sitting in a circle, their faces lighting up as they shared stories and exchange laden with laughter and wisdom. The thought thrilled her, but then she paused, sensing an emotional weight. What if sharing those stories brought to light sorrows instead? Could she guide them through potential discomfort? Each story might unveil layers of griefs long buried. And who was she to navigate such sensitive territory? Her heart raced as the scenario unfolded before her eyes. A tension building, balancing guidance with genuine human connection seemed to edge on impossible. Margaret took a deep breath, forcing herself to lean into the discomfort. If she could embrace her vulnerabilities, she could invite others to do the same. Vulnerability became her bridge, a way to craft authentic dialogue that would foster deep connections. Perhaps this was the very essence of mentoring, facilitating human narratives while grounding them in nutrition. With renewed conviction, she focused on infusing elements of storytelling into her workshop. Each section would blend narratives her own and those shared by participants. This wasn't merely about teaching. It was about creating a tapestry of experiences that honored every individual present. As she powered through the final touches, Margaret recognized a profound shift within herself. No longer merely a facilitator of knowledge, she positioned herself as a seeker of stories. Each pulse of excitement in her chest illustrated the growth and courage that came with relinquishing the rigid role of the teacher. Instead, she would be a participant in this unfolding journey. Just as she finalized her last notes, a wave of anticipation washed over her, melding with a persistent undercurrent of fear. The revelations awaited her were more than just professional. They rung deeply personal. Could she truly embrace the teacher-learner dynamic and face her insecurities head-on? Margaret set her pen down, palms resting on the table. Tomorrow awaited a stage set for connections that would demand emotional honesty and call her to action. She sensed the precipice of change, bolstered by what she had yet to learn about herself and the seniors who would soon gather in her kitchen. However, there remained a gnawing question, one that hung in the air like an unresolved melody. Would she navigate the uncharted waters of shared vulnerability, or would the weight of her insecurities prevent her from diving in? Margaret awoke to a clear morning, the sun gleaming brightly, as if demanding her attention. Her heart raced with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Today was the day, a moment she had been rehearsing in her head for weeks. The workshop wasn't just a professional obligation. It represented her commitment to embracing vulnerability. Every segment she prepared became more than mere content. They transformed into gateways for authentic discussion. She focused intently on her audience, imagining the smiles, the frowns, and the expressions of inquiry that might cross their faces. Each time she envisioned presenting, a question loomed anew. Would her carefully crafted queries resonate, or would they provoke silence? Digging deeper, she understood this was less about instructing the seniors and more about creating mutual understanding, a blend of guidance illuminated by shared experiences. As she poured her first cup of coffee that morning, her thoughts flitted between enthusiasm and doubt. Each sip turned into a mental rehearsal, her mind wading through uncertainties. The doubts were fierce. Could she handle the emotional tangles when stories of love and loss crowded the space? Margaret dismissed them, forcing herself to concentrate on the strength of her newfound purpose instead. She was there to encourage memory-laden conversations, not merely deliver knowledge. Arriving at the community center, she inhaled deeply, absorbing the everyday bustle around her while bracing herself. Surrounded by an array of scents wafting through the air, aromas from the kitchen mixed with floral notes from the community garden, she knew she needed to create a comforting atmosphere. This was her realm of possibilities, but nerves jostled against her resolve. Would they share their stories? Would they embrace her attempts to connect? Once inside, she arranged chairs in a circle, positioning herself among her participants rather than up front. This subtle shift in dynamics felt right, aligning with her perspective that she was sharing rather than preaching. As she laid out colorful table mats, each depicting fruits and vegetables she intended to discuss, she allowed herself to imagine the narratives that would accompany each image. Personal stories wrapped around each item linked to universal emotions: joy, regret, nostalgia. When her participants trickled in, A palpable energy spun around the circle. Their faces, etched with lines of experience, bore both caution and curiosity. As their eyes landed on her, she greeted them with a smile that carried the weight of understanding. "Let us talk about food as a friend," she began, her voice steadying her own racing heart. "What role does it play in your life?" The question hung in the air, and as Margaret watched the seniors absorb it, she felt a frisson of hope. Sitting back, she encouraged them to reflect, ready to navigate the terrain they uncovered. She shared her own story about a family recipe, her vulnerability emerging as a compass for others. Responses came slowly, each senior weaving in their history and likeness to that feeling of familial connection, a tapestry of love, regret, and resilience unfolding in front of her. And just as the stories began to flow, she felt a stirring from one participant, a woman named Edith, who looked contemplative, perhaps more reserved than the others. As she caught Margaret's eye, the intensity of her gaze spoke volumes of the hidden stories trapped behind the years of silence. Would Edith break through, sharing the burdens of her past? Or would the moment of authenticity slip away? Margaret sensed the shift, the tide of energy focusing on this pivotal moment. She leaned forward, arms resting comfortably on her knees, an invitation expressed through patience and openness. Would she find the courage to push deeper, to ask questions that might lead to more profound truths? Was she prepared for what surfaced, understanding that some stories would bear weight and urgency? The stakes of her vulnerability were mounting. Her own insecurities ebbed and flowed as she considered what might lie ahead, not just for her participants, but also for herself. In this shared space of human connection, paths of potential transformation beckoned, with stories echoing across the room. As Edith began to speak, the atmosphere shifted. Margaret could feel anticipation crackling like a live wire. This was more than just a workshop. It was an exploration into the heart of shared experience, necessitating a new level of engagement she had yet to fully accept. And as Margaret leaned closer, breath held in suspension, she couldn't shake the question that danced at the edge of her consciousness. Would she be able to support them through the veils of sorrow and joy, or were there still uncharted waters threatening to wash over her own hesitations? Edith took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on a spot just past Margaret's shoulder as she began to unravel the tapestry of her past. Each word emerged like an uncoiling thread, hesitantly at first, but soon gathering momentum. As Edith spoke, Margaret felt the weight of everyone's anticipation shift. It was a testament not just to the significance of the moment, but also to the responsibility that lay in Margaret's hands. Margaret listened intently, interpreting the subtle shifts in Edith's voice, a tremor here, a lingering pause there. Every syllable delivered a glimpse into a life marked by both joy and sorrow. In that moment, Margaret recognized the power of vulnerability. It was transformative, cutting through the layers of time and hesitation. But with that realization came a mounting definition of her role. She was not merely a facilitator. She was a guardian of these stories. As the atmosphere thickened with intimacy, Margaret prided herself on offering a safe harbor, a respite from the storms of memory. Yet in the back of her mind, doubts resurfaced. What if she didn't respond the right way? What if Edith stepped back, cloaking herself in silence again? Could she nestle the emotional landscape of such deep stories without sinking herself into the mire of unease? Margaret's fingers fidgeted gently with a laminated guide sheet she had prepared. She had crafted questions punctuated with sensitivity, but the theory felt flimsy when faced with the raw practicality of real emotion. With each heartbeat, she felt the ticking clock of opportunity. She had to navigate this moment wisely, to walk the razor's edge between support and intrusion. "Thank you for sharing, Edith," she began cautiously, choosing her words with care. "Your journey reveals so much about the way food intertwines with memory. It can carry both comfort and complexity. What is one dish that brings it all back for you?" The room held its breath. A collective focus tightened on Edith, who seemed to draw strength from the delicate atmosphere Margaret had created. The response deepened the current of connection, as Edith launched into a story about her grandmother's famous pie, a dish synonymous with family gatherings, yet also a reminder of a shattered relationship. Margaret hung on every word, not just for the tapestry of Edith's life being woven before her, but for what it revealed about the nature of their shared experience. Suddenly, she noticed something awakening within her, an innate capacity to empathize, a talent she had never before acknowledged. It felt liberating to actualize this potential, yet it simultaneously demanded more from her. With this realization came a creeping sense of accountability. Was she prepared to meet the expectations accompanying that talent? As the narratives flowed, an unexpected revelation prickled at the edges of her consciousness. Each story shared represented not just an exercise in vulnerability, but a stepping stone toward deeper self-discovery, not only for her audience, but for herself. The realization struck her with clarity. To fully engage, she had to better understand her own vulnerabilities, her own narratives. The potential for transformation was mutual. Yet just as she began to formulate strategies to explore her own past, she sensed that the energy in the room shifted again, this time toward a young man sitting quietly in the corner, whose eyes mirrored a mix of fear and yearning. His expression was a reflection of hesitation that seemed contagious. Margaret felt a flutter of concern. She understood that now was not merely about Edith, but also about inviting this newcomer, ensuring he felt visible amidst the unfolding tales. Have you found any particular foods that hold significance for you? I'd love to hear your thoughts, she prompted gently, her voice inviting yet firm. In his silence, her heart raced. Would he speak or withdraw? Would she continue to embrace vulnerability while seeking to inspire it in others? The pivotal point loomed before her, a challenge thick with uncertainty. It was a reflection of her growth, her journey intertwined with those she hoped to inspire, and now she stood at the intersection of her professional aspirations and personal fears. As the room awaited his reply, she felt that familiar pulse of anxiety churn again within. She didn't know if she was ready to peel back more layers. Would she have the courage to accept the new stories that lay ahead, or was this moment merely a whisper of fleeting opportunity? Her heart thrummed in anticipation. This was just the beginning. The time had come for her to confront not only her doubts, but the possibility of profound existential revelations. What would she ultimately discover about herself in this journey of connection? The young man's gaze flickered, darting between trust and trepidation as the silence around him pressed. Margaret felt the air thickening, each second stretching painfully. The stories so carefully shared by Edith hung like delicate ornaments. Yet here was another vulnerable thread dangling, his unresolved narrative waiting to be woven into the fabric. He began, the word barely escaping his lips. His voice was shy, hesitant. I think I used to love making pancakes with my mom. It was our thing. A wave of relief washed over Margaret. She could sense the shifting dynamics of the room, the collective exhalation as the group leaned in, eager to learn more. Encouraged, she nodded, guiding him with an inviting but gentle tone. What was special about those moments? He swallowed hard, his eyes illuminating with a flicker of nostalgia that was quickly overshadowed by discomfort. Margaret noted the shadows of an unexamined past looming behind his smile, something more beneath the layer of simplicity he presented. It sparked a realization within her. Each story shared tonight could not only reveal personal history, but also serve as a passage to unlocking concealed emotions. Forcing herself to focus on him, she pushed aside her own discomfort. Relying on the anchor of his narrative seemed wiser than her introspections at that moment. Take your time, she said softly, hoping to create a cocooned moment where he could feel safe enough to share more. They were just a way to connect, you know? He continued, his voice gaining strength. But after she passed, I kind of stopped. I couldn't. His words trailed off, and Margaret's heart ached at the rawness of his grief. This was the moment she had feared, but also anticipated. The precise collision of empathy and vulnerability was unfolding before her. Suddenly, she felt the flickering candle of her own stories igniting, a strong urge to reciprocate, to expose her own messiness. Wasn't that what Edith had done successfully? Wasn't that why the atmosphere felt charged, almost electric? But doubts tightened around her, hefting the weight of her own lingering fears. What if sharing would only diminish the importance of the young man's words? Pancakes, she echoed after a thoughtful pause. There's such warmth in those moments. It sounds like there's a lot of love tied up in that memory. The young man's shoulders relaxed slightly, a glimmer of gratitude washing over his expression. Yeah, and in that brief exchange, Margaret felt herself evolving within the room. She was no longer just a participant or an observer. She was becoming a catalyst. This realization ignited something within her, an understanding that her own fears paled in comparison to the potential for connection. She could serve as both a guardian for others' stories and as someone capable of sharing her own. Quickly, Margaret reconsidered her approach. She no longer aimed to merely facilitate. She craved moments of authenticity. A moment of collective revelation awaited, and she felt a pulse of bravery surge as she reached back to her own past, ready to unveil a fragment of her own life not for the glory of sympathy, but as an honest offering of understanding. I, too, have lost a loved one who made pancakes, she began tentatively, her own vulnerability seeping into her voice. For me, it was my dad. We had this recipe that was a disaster most days, but the kitchen always smelled of laughter. I found comfort in the chaos of it. Yet Margaret paused, feeling the space expand, inviting her to step deeper. Yet, losing that connection felt like losing part of myself. It was terrifying. She realized that she was not just recounting a memory. She was standing on the precipice of courage, facing her own unresolved issues. That moment cracked open something raw between her and the young man, a mutual understanding layered amidst shared pain. The eyes in the room shifted, embracing her vulnerability as collective strength. Yet, amid the warmth, uncertainty still simmered. Would this newfound openness deepen their connections, or would it lead to uncomfortable truths best left unspoken? Margaret felt a stirring, her heart racing, aware that this was the threshold of change. The journey to discover and confront the complexities of their respective relationships with food and memory was only beginning. What other stories lay buried beneath fractured moments? She sensed a kaleidoscope of emotions unfolding, waiting to be unveiled. But in allowing herself to be vulnerable, what whispers of her own heart would come to light next? As the group leaned in, the next wave of stories began to shimmer beyond the edge of revelation. Margaret's heart drummed against her ribcage as she shared her own memories, but now she felt a different force propelling her. Vulnerability had ignited a fire that warmed the room, yet it also exposed her to the chill of potential judgment. The young man's gaze was now steady, a reflection of trust that hinted at the transformative power of the moment. Around her, the dynamics of the group were shifting. The glimmers of empathy exchanged created a deeper connection than she had dared to imagine. It felt as if a door rumbled to life behind her, promising more than the weight of past grief, an avenue toward healing through authenticity. Each story was drifting like leaves in the wind, spiraling closer to shared understanding. In the hush that followed, Margaret sensed the natural pause inviting others to contribute. A woman with auburn curls, whose name escaped Margaret for the moment, hesitantly cleared her throat. I used to hate cooking because it reminded me of the countless meals I prepared for my ex-husband. Her voice trembled. After we divorced, I avoided the kitchen like it was haunted. The confession drew Margaret's focus. The sense of shared pain echoed in her, reigniting her drive to connect. What changed for you? She asked gently, pulling on the thread of the woman's story to weave it into the fabric they were creating together. A tapestry of sorrow and laughter unfurled as the woman continued, recounting how she discovered joy in experimenting with food again, beginning with simple, joyful recipes that made her feel liberated rather than burdened. As the stories flowed, Margaret felt herself drifting, each tale offering a glimpse into another's heart. By tangentially exploring pain through the lens of food, they remained tethered to their emotional truths while renewing their connections to past joys. A quiet strength emerged in keeping those collective experiences alive. With every shared word, she became more resolute in her endeavor to foster this unassuming yet powerful bond. Yet amidst the warmth blossoming, a disquiet surfaced within her. What if her own story, her worry over revealing the layers of her past, stifled the energy unfolding before her? A clash between her desire for openness and the fear of overshadowing others flared inside her. Cooking can reclaim the memories we thought we lost, Margaret contributed, ensuring her voice held space for both her and the young man's past. It's about owning our narratives. She felt invigorated, a thread of insight shining through the shadow of uncertainty. Each moment spent encouraging others blessed her own path towards self-discovery. Maybe, just maybe, this was the catalyst she had needed. "Can we share a dish that symbolizes our journey?" she proposed, feeling the rush of enthusiasm burn away her hesitation. "A recipe that reminds us of where we've been and where we're going?" The atmosphere brightened, sparks of creativity igniting among them. Names were tossed like confetti: lasagna, apple pie, curry, all chosen not just for flavor, but for the stories they carried. Margaret noted how this simple act of sharing recipes turned from a mundane tradition into a unique exploration of each individual's journey. As they settled back into conversation, Margaret found herself reflecting not on the words she had shared, but on what remained unspoken. The notion of her father, a figure tied not only to pancakes, but to an overwhelming desire for affirmation from someone long gone. A knot of realization tightened in her stomach. Perhaps it was time to confront that past and reclaim the joy in cooking fully. As chaos swirled within her, the truth simmered. She had to face her own fears head-on and harness the strength she gleaned from others' stories. But, accepting that truth lingered just out of reach like an unfinished recipe. What ingredients were still missing in her self-discovery? A deeper confrontation with her own grief. And what if those ingredients were key to unlocking the flavor of her own capacity to heal? The flame of determination flickered brightly, and she felt poised on the cusp of revelation. Would the courage to investigate her emotions lead her to embrace the kitchen once more, or would she find it too overwhelming to navigate the depths of her memories? An innate sense of urgency thrummed beneath her skin, compelling her to delve deeper. As eyes turned back to her, she faced an imminent decision: to step into her fears and reveal the complexities of her relationship with loss and love, or to remain in the shadows of hesitation. What awaited her if she broke the surface of her emotional turmoil? Would this path lead her to new flavors of connection, or to truths she was still unequipped to confront? As the gathering of seniors continued to unfold, Margaret felt a wave of clarity wash over her. Each story shared served as a thread, weaving a tapestry of resilience and vulnerability within the circle. With every recipe proposed, she sensed her own narrative calling out to be told. "Let me share something that has been on my mind," Margaret began, her voice steady yet soft, resonating with the collective experiences around her. "As we explore these precious memories tied to food, I can't help but reflect on my own journey of loss tied to the kitchen. It goes beyond mere recipes. It's about legacy." Silence draped over the room, the air electric with expectation. She took a deep breath. "When my father passed away, I found myself lost in the very places that used to bring me comfort. Cooking for him was a celebration, a way to connect. The kitchen became a reminder of absence." Margaret felt a brief moment of hesitation, but pushed through. "For too long, I avoided cooking. I believed each meal would serve as a bitter reminder rather than a source of warmth or creativity." A murmur of understanding spread among the group. They sensed her struggle, opened the doors for her truth to flow freely. "But it doesn't have to be that way," she continued, ignited by the warmth of their collective spirit. "Cooking can be an honoring, a way of breathing life into the memories we cherish. That's what I hope we can explore." In that moment, she felt the knot within her untwist. By voicing her own past, she provided space for not only her healing, but for every member of the group, creating an environment where shared stories felt sacred. Margaret's eyes scanned the room, and she noticed glimmers of empathy reflected back at her. The connection deepened as she ventured further into vulnerability. "I now realize that the recipes passed through generations carry more than just ingredients. They hold emotions, stories of struggles, and triumphs. I want to learn cooking not simply as a chore, but as an act of love for my father, my family, for myself." The revelations swept the room. They ranged from chuckles to nods of approval, creating a ripple of understanding and concord. Her bittersweet memories seemed tangible, prompting others to gear up their own reflections, their connections forming thick layers of camaraderie. From the back of the circle, the young man spoke softly, inspired by Margaret's sharing. "I think I need to reclaim pancakes too. Maybe there's a way to welcome back those memories as joyful again." Margaret's heart swelled. Solidarity blossomed in that shared moment, affirming she wasn't alone in her experiences. With a renewed sense of purpose, Margaret decided to turn this intimate gathering into a workshop filled with lessons in both nutrition and emotional connection. She envisioned not just sharing recipes, but instilling each dish with meaningful conversation. Her mind raced with ideas. How could they share their histories intermingled with food? How could stories dovetail into nourishment? Since we're on the topic of significant dishes, how about we create our own recipe book? She proposed, excitement bubbling in her voice. Each of us could contribute a recipe alongside the story that comes with it. Not only would we preserve our stories, but we'd also honor our culinary legacies. Eager murmurs ricocheted in agreement, igniting a wave of enthusiasm all around. Each member could add their unique flavor, creating a diverse spectrum of voices that would resonate throughout the circle, a reimagination of their connections through food. As they settled into conversation about what to include, Margaret could feel her own transformation solidifying. This wasn't about simply passing on knowledge. It was about creating a living narrative, one rich with shared stories that transcended generations. By the end of the workshop, Margaret felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The ripple effect encompassed not just her healing pathway, but a shared journey of exploration. Everyone was transforming as they built connections through food and memory. Days later, leaning against her counter, Margaret held the inaugural edition of the recipe book, Nourishing Our Histories. Flipping through its pages filled with colorful recipes and meaningful anecdotes, she recognized the collective healing power woven within. And in a single moment of reflection, Margaret grasped the full realization of how far she had come. From uncertainty and fear into a strong, confident leader capable of knitting together stories with meals, she had conquered her own journey of loss and emerged resilient. As she shelved the book beside an array of avocados sparkling in the sunlight, Margaret stood tall. The gentle warmth of self-acceptance and fulfillment enveloped her. Amidst the laughter and stories, she had become not only a mentor to others, but also a curator of her own evolving narrative. It felt crucial, meaningful, and deserved. Now was the moment to propel her experience further into the community. She could dream even more, helping refine wellness through the understanding of personal histories. This was the moment for all of you who share this journey. Don't let fear hold you back. Embrace those stories and the magic they can unlock within you. You need to subscribe now. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support. Comment below your thoughts and theories about Margaret's journey. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need inspiration in their own lives.